Hey everyone! So, episode 3 of My Hero Academia Season 5 has dropped and we're finally off to the races, as now it's the point of no return. There's no more filler to be done and only fights and revelations will happen for the next 9 or so episodes. So, if you haven't watched the most recent episode of My Hero Academia, be sure to subscribe to the channel for all of my reviews and breakdowns, and then go watch the episode and come back to hear my thoughts. I wouldn't want to spoil anything for everyone, and my breakdowns really only cover what I think was important during the episode, so if you like subtle nuance between characters and emotionally getting involved, be sure to support the anime. And if you want to see me transcend dimensions and chat with me during the video's premiere, be sure to hit that notification bell and set your notifications from personalized to all. That way you get to see all of my videos and not just the ones YouTube decides that you'd like. But now, it's time to open up the bar. Let's head inside. Alright, welcome to the bar, folks. So, episode 3. Now remember what I said during the intro. This is just going to be me essentially talking about the parts of the episode that I thought were either faithful to the manga's interpretation, or in a way helped expand what the manga originally couldn't cover, and in turn provides more exposition on what it initially never did. And today, the 3 parts that we're going to discuss is the progress of 1B and whether or not they're actually as strong as 1A, Deku and All Might's conversation about One For All, and finally, we may get a tad bit spoilery for the future because we gotta discuss Shinso and Aizawa, because I've seen some people on the timeline actually say that Shinso couldn't be a hero, so I gotta squash that shit immediately. Also, I know last week I implied that this would be the week that Present Mike talks to Aizawa about his time at UA with his buddies, but after this week's episode falling short of that, I went back and reread the arc. So I gotta apologize because it turns out we're probably not gonna get any mention of Cloud Boy until at least episode 12 or until the battle is over. So with that L being said, let's go over to the wall and break this bitch down. Okay, so in general, episode 3 of season 5 circles around the fact that the joint training arc has officially begun. Though, before we get to that, we gotta talk about the scene in which Deku speaks to All Might about his dream within the singularity. Now, believe it or not, this is a tad bit changed from the manga to the anime, and to be quite honest, I think it's one of those Chekhov gun type of situations that they just introduced. In this scene here in the manga, Deku never mentions the quirk singularity doomsday theory by name, he merely brushes over the fact. The first time we initially hear about the theory is when Bakugo and Todoroki are taking their provisional makeup exam. And essentially, the theory means that as generations go on, we're gonna get more quirks like Shoto's, or in a grander scale like Eri's quirk. Think back to the previous season, those kids had some pretty fearsome quirks. I mean, there was a kid that had a fucking Stephen King Langolier that devoured anything in sight as a quirk. I mean, even think about little Koda in this situation. His parents' water quirks gave him the ability to produce a huge jet stream of water at what looks like with zero manipulation, akin to Manuel's quirk that actually requires water. So essentially, the theory amounts to that one day a quirk will exist, or a quirk already exists, that is capable of ending all of society and pretty much just, ending the world, which tells me one thing. And you all know that I love to say this. You don't talk about something unless you are planning for it to appear in the future. And when you consider this thought not being an actual player in the manga and it receiving more attention in the anime, we have to point it out as something that they specifically added in hindsight during the script's development. Which means, possibly a bigger bad than Shigaraki is on the rise, or has already risen. Now, whether or not Shigaraki will be that bad is to be said. So either way, hold on to your butts, because my hero is letting us know that this shit is gonna hit the fan eventually. And I'm gonna be making a theory that actually for like the first time is pretty safe for anime onlys to watch, sometime in the coming week, that involves this guy. So be sure to keep your eye out for it coming soon, because my question is this guy Makia, or the third user of One For All? Anyway, let's get to the battle between 1A and 1B. Our first matchup is Kaminari, Kirishima, Koda, Sue, and Shinso, and prior to the assignments, we learn that Shinso is participating in hopes that he'll be transferring to the hero course, and as such, he'll be the only student participating twice. And while the students point out that the 5v4 advantage is a little unfair, Aizawa tells them that only 4 people have to be immobilized for the win. And Aizawa also spins it that the team that actually has Shinso on it has the detriment, as he really hasn't had much training. So, as for our 1B participants, we have Jirota and his beast quirk, Hiryu Deku and his Scales quirk, Ibara and her Vines quirk, and finally Kosei and his Solid Air quirk. Now I know some people were kind of unsatisfied again with this episode, but me personally, I enjoyed it. Yeah, the animation style is kind of getting on my nerves a bit, and I hope it improves as the season goes on. But as for the content itself, I love that we get to see All Might become a student of the game once again and starts running analysis through his head about the prospective winners. But at the same time, there's really only one debacle that really sets apart 1A and 1B. And while All Might states that 1A has had more experience with Crisis while 1B hasn't, there really is only one experience that sets them apart: the USJ incident. Meaning that instead of a villain invasion happening at the USJ to 1B, Vlad was able to teach them the actual thing that UA wanted them to learn at the USJ. And because of that, Vlad was able to give the students of 1B a more structured learning experience, because the last time I checked, 1A and 1B took on the villains during the Forest training arc. Yeah, there's Stain, Overhaul, Gentle, and I guess All For One that could possibly be held over Class 1B. But beyond those, I really can't recall any other major incidents that would separate them. So for these fights, I would say that they are definitely on equal footing to a degree. Yeah, it worked to 1A's advantage during the sports festival, but now they're more or less halfway through their first year at UA and have become provisionally licensed heroes, so we can expect them to go at each other pretty hard. And lastly, we gotta talk about our wild card finally entering the fray: Shinso. Personally, I loved it when Shinso first entered the series during the UA Sports Festival. Not only was he a refreshing take on the student that didn't make it in, he represents the part of heroic society that has quirks that, for the most part, are feared. I mean, his go-to flashback that we see is that in middle school, fellow students feared but admired Shinso's quirk, and it's pleasant to see that Shinso's academia doesn't base itself in fear. Though it was kind of sad that during that flashback, people were like, oh, how do you know if he's having an actual conversation with you and not brainwashing you? But in my opinion, that just throws us more into Shinso's side, just in hopes that he succeeds, you know? Shinso is one of the most mature characters and one of the most driven. He didn't get in on recommendations, and discrimination kept him out of the hero course because he couldn't take down 60-foot robots with one punch. And granted, we know that UA is a bit biased when it comes to their hero students, especially in the case of them choosing Bakugo to speak for the entirety of first years during the festival. And from that moment, we learned that there wasn't one other student in general studies, or Class C rather, going that hard for a spot in the hero course, other than Shinso. And this is happening during a time when you have people whose quirks change the fucking weather. Shinso knows he's at a disadvantage, and when he steps out to make his speech to the kids at the hero course, you can't help but like the guy, because he's fighting for his future, for his dream to be looked at equally. And the series managed to find the best possible teacher for our boy, Aizawa. Eraserhead was one of the first people accepted into UA on the basis of having a minor emitter quirk. His quirk, like Shinso's, does nothing to enhance his fighting capabilities, and in a way are akin to somebody like Momo or Koda. Granted, Koda can summon animals to ravage an area, and Momo can literally create anything by knowing its atomic structure. So without Aizawa as a trendsetter, people with overwhelming quirks like Shoto, Tenya, and Bakugo would be the only ones accepted into hero courses. And someone like Deku would definitely not get into UA. And we learned in this episode that Shinso is doing his damned best to earn a spot. I mean, he's even trying to master Aizawa's capture tape, in addition to honing his own brainwash with the advancement in support gear. I was excited to see what his persona chords would look like in the anime because the cliffhanger from the chapter was drawn with extreme detail, and what we got in the anime was this. So yeah, while you can't expect this level of detail and shading to translate, this is why sometimes I enjoy the manga more, because of Horikoshi himself's art style. All in all, episode 3, in my opinion, finally starts the season, and there's way too much rehashing going on, because it really feels like this was just the first episode to a degree. Granted, the conversation with All Might and Deku is fresh, and to an extent, detail was added that indeed helps us further understand the universe that's been unfolding in front of us. That's what the anime is really there for, though. Nuance that you couldn't do in a manga is left to the anime to fill. We want the performances of actors to reflect the emotions that we felt while we were reading, and one of the biggest gripes that people had with the scenes in the beginning of the episode was that All For One felt less menacing than the manga counterpart. I do agree with some of the criticisms of Season 5, especially the art style ones. The comparison between Season 2 and Season 5 is pretty jarring, but it's something that I really hope will adjust as the season progresses. Though my question to you anime-onlys is, what do you think about the Quirk Singularity Doomsday Theory? Do you think that it's something that'll pan out in future seasons? And for you manga readers, what are you expecting more of as the season season goes on. Do you want more elaboration on a certain scene that left you unfulfilled? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button. But for now, I'm gonna get out of here. Cheers!